All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So today, I want to talk with you about um, next window, please. It's something that dawned on me as I am a frequent frequent flyer of various quick service restaurant drive-throughs, and I started noticing a trend probably about 6 months ago that I thought was interesting, and thank you, AIM, for allowing me the opportunity to tell this story. So what we're going to talk about, and Patty hit on it a lot, and we're working with Mojex quite a bit on this, is how can we leverage RFID for inventory and traceability to help really combat labor shortages? And that's really where I'm going to take the conversation today. So very happy to be here. So let's go ahead and get started. So when we were originally going to do the AIM Summit as an in-person thing, I had some kind of poll questions, if you will. So I'm just going to talk about this, and I want you to kind of put yourself in the position of a new worker at a quick service restaurant. I always think about my first job was at Dairy Queen in Webster Grove, St. Louis, which is a suburb of St. Louis. I think it was about 85, 84. And I was new to the labor market. And that summer they introduced the blizzard. And I didn't know it was a big thing back then, but I got to actually make and serve the first blizzard out of our restaurant. And so that's kind of my claim to fame. But I kind of want you guys to think about that, because I'm 55 years old, and I'm sure there's a lot of people on here that have worked in quick service restaurants or have children or maybe even grandchildren that are starting to enter the labor market. So the first thing I want you to kind of ponder is, as you have been customers in quick service restaurants, either through the drive-through or going into a restaurant, because I think now we actually can go into a quick service restaurant. Have you noticed better service at quick service restaurants since the start of the pandemic? And you certainly don't have to put your comment, your answer, but I'll get back to this. The second thing is, think about a manager at quick service restaurants. True or false? My planned staffing levels are aligned to our customer experience goals. And I think that's very true. We're going to talk about that. Is, these QSRs, from a corporate perspective, have a brand to protect, right? And they have to staff these restaurants in order to meet those different goals. So I'm going to ask you today to kind of think and be empathetic with the worker as well as the manager in these areas, and kind of work backwards as far as how the technology can help meet some of these concerns. And the third question is, again, putting your manager hat on, my staff has the time and tools to address increased inventory and traceability requirements. And that's kind of a shout out to the FSMA 204 regulations that are coming about. As we talk about this, again, think about the worker and think about the lack of labor that's out there and the struggle just to maintain my brand and make sure that my customers are having a good experience. How does that relate to now I have these increased responsibilities and tracking requirements, and how that's going to work? Okay. So next, at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that whether it's a project or not, people are really the key to success of an organization. And that's really what I want to focus on, is taking this from a user perspective. So right now, let's meet our quick service restaurant staff. And again, this is a new reality for those that are new to the workforce. So let me kind of set this up. So our QSR staff are young adults in the most cases. Their first jobs for many. And again, I was in that position. I'm sure that a lot of you folks that are on the call today have worked at a QSR in the past, or again, you have teenagers that are doing that now, and you're finding that it's different, right? It was a shock, going from making a hamburger at mom and dad's house to now going into an industrial environment and having to do that. And that's what what's interesting here is these young adults are going into these behind the scenes environments that is completely foreign to them, which raises the anxiety level of dealing with this. It's not just I'm hanging out with mom or dad and we're cooking some burgers before we watch the football game. It's now, hey, so and so, you have 10 cars in the drive-through line. Let's get cooking because we gotta keep get these people going. So it's an environment that's very, very new. and the pace is often overwhelming, right? So you start putting these things together, and hopefully some of those memories are coming back. I know at the Dairy Queen I worked at, which is the only QSR that I worked at, we didn't even have a drive-through. We were one of those fancy Grazer stores that we cooked burgers and we served ice cream, but there was no drive-through. But the pace really was overwhelming to me personally. And then stack on top of that, dealing with the public. Challenging to say the least is probably the understatement that you'll hear today. These are the workers that we're thinking about right now, and that we've all most likely been. We're used to dealing with our family, we're used to dealing with our friends, we're used to dealing with our our circle of influence, if you will, and everybody kind of has the same sort of outlook on life. Now you put this person in a stressful environment, and they're dealing with the public. This is very, very, very difficult for somebody to adjust to. I think of this as that when I entered the Air Force in 1986, and when we got off the bus, going to Lackland Air Force Base, they had all these series of yellow painted, footprints that are on the concrete, and that's where you're supposed to step and stay there, as you got off the bus, and you got yelled at by the drill instructor. And that was, kind of what I see these young adults, dealing with. And at the end of the day, they get that first paycheck, and it's not that first paycheck doesn't cover, that new sports car dream that that they had, floating around the back of their heads. So you think about all these things, and I think it really starts kind of bringing back memories for me, and it really helps me to understand what's the perception of the workers that we're asking to do these monumental tasks, such as the FSMA 204 and some of these more advanced concepts. Because at the end of the day, the store managers, these are people that are responsible for staffing, for training these folks, and for the overall operations. And really, for a lot of these people, they're almost like, quasi parents, right? These young adults that come in and they're really trying to learn something. They almost remind me of, kind of like a scoutmaster in some ways, that, not only they're mentoring, but they're listening, they're, hearing, listening to their wants and their needs and their complaints. And at the end of the day, they have to be able to really make sure that, that they and the managers focus on what the customer needs. Okay. So now that we have that, that image in your head, and you've gotten those memories back, and the therapy is going to be having this to kick up here. Let's talk about the manager's perspective. It's kind of a mission impossible, right? If they choose to accept it, corporate objectives are set with certain staffing levels. And those objectives are kind of on the left here. You have to deliver a high quality product at a competitive price. You have to deliver that fast. The Q and QSR is quick, right? It's all about fast. It's all about high quality. It's all about competitive pricing. And then at the end of the day, it's about customer experience. And these objectives really make up the brand of these quick service restaurants. It's how do I make sure that my customer has a consistent quality product quickly, and it's delivered with a smile on my face, so that person goes and gets their breakfast in the same place the next day. And I'm guilty of sin on this, is that, one of the things, the rituals I do is I always go to a QSR in the morning, and sometimes I take my little dog with me, and we go through the drive-through, we get the same thing. We say hi to, the person we've gotten to know, and that's kind of part of a ritual. But I'll tell you what, when I have a problem, or I have a certain person that it comes and I have a bad experience, I start to look at other alternatives. And that's really what they're trying to avoid here. So the resources that are given to these folks are, we train their managers. You've heard of Burger University and all these different training programs that are famous in this industry. You're given the staff, to work the counter, to work the kitchen, to work the drive-through. And then you're given equipment, cooking equipment, tools, processes, and training. If you've ever been in one of these environments, one of the things I think is just fascinating when I'm in a drive-through and I'm at that second window and I see the automated machine that's filling up my Coke, right? It's dropping the cup, it's filling it up, it's putting ice in. I just kind of marvel of that automation. And if you have a chance to go into the back, there's all these pictures of exactly how to make those different products so they're consistent. So there's a lot of thought that goes into making sure that me as a customer have the same high quality product, same experience, no matter which QSR that I go within that brand. Okay. Now you start adding some challenges, right? So labor recruitment and retention. These managers are responsible for staffing different levels based on, the normal rushes. You have your breakfast rush, your lunch rush, your dinner rush, but also you have, different things that may affect it based on that market. If you're, 2 blocks down from a major college stadium, then you could have, rushes at the middle of the night. You got to be prepared to staff for, when the football game lets out, or there's, people are coming in, and you have to be very, very sure that you have the right labor to meet those demands, or, your customers go somewhere else. And also just retention is difficult. These young adults and folks that work here, they have friends that also work at other QSRs, and they talk, right? These friends talk. As you know, social media is crazy nowadays, and texting that, we're seeing this across the verticals that I work with at Zebra, whether it's QSRs or even e-commerce fulfillment. 10 cents, more at a different restaurant that's more automated and a better work environment. We're seeing this labor, retention issue is huge. So being able to provide tools and technology that is familiar to the workforce that we're addressing is a huge thing for retention, and really helps out with meeting these quality objectives on the left. Now you start seeing some unplanned staff level disruptions. You have somebody that calls in sick at the last moment, or like I said, they just quit because they think they can get 10 cents more somewhere else. Now all of a sudden you're adding some stress to those managers, right? You're adding stress to the staff because all of a sudden at the last minute they have to do more with less people, and that model of staffing level is getting disrupted, and it's going to affect your objectives to the left. You're going to have trouble providing that high quality product. You're going to have trouble doing that fast service, and you're going to have trouble giving that customer the experience that they're expecting. And now you take all of that and you start putting in these regulations of increased inventory, traceability with lot codes and expiration dates that we just talked about over my predecessors and that have spoken this afternoon. And then things just really start going awry. There's red flags everywhere. The managers start getting, they start quitting. The equipment and tools start becoming less applicable, and you start seeing a dive in your different objectives. And that's really what's happening behind the scenes. So what the heck are you going to do about it, right? And that's where we're seeing our customers, not only the QSR restaurants, but as my predecessor at Mojex just talked about, all the way through the supply chain. How do I deal with this? And we're finding is that the industry in general is turning towards more automation to address these labor issues. And what's happening is regulatory compliance like FSMA 204 is becoming almost a byproduct to automation, because the labor issues are what's here front and center. So at Zebra, we have what we call a warehouse maturity model, and kind of don't worry about the warehouse right now, but it's a graduation of maturity steps that shows where our customers are in capability. So phase one being kind of basic, where we're using barcoding, we're using key entry, we're using spreadsheets, to manage inventory and to manage those critical tracking elements that we talked about, wearables, voice, things like that. But they're worker-driven transactions. In other words, a worker has to stop what they're doing and go over and scan or write down on a clipboard that 10 cases of meat just got delivered into the quick service restaurant, and that I've done the inventory and I'm supposed to have 10, I have 5. I write that down on a spreadsheet, or I key it into a system, and that triggers an order replenishment. But again, that is being done in addition, or when I have time, that I'm meeting those key objectives that we've been talking about. And what we're seeing is in these later phases, is we're seeing a movement like we've never seen before towards more sensor-driven technology. And that's what we've been talking about today with the Williot solution and RFID. How can I implement RFID and put sensors at that dock door so that those smart labels that we've been talking about can read when something gets in? It can automatically sense that now I've received 10 cases of beef or 5 cases of lettuce or whatever it is. Why do I have to be using a spreadsheet or a checklist or anything that we all have grown up with in order to capture that? And why do I have to go in and spend 4 hours, during the middle of my shift or at midnight when, hopefully I don't have a rush to go and count everything that's in the shelf and place that order, right? And what's happening is that's table stakes. But now with FSMA 204, it's the absolute right thing to do to keep us all safe. We also have to make sure that nothing's expiring, that we're using the older stuff first, that we're responding in case there is, God forbid, a recall with lettuce for E. coli. How do we make sure that we're responding to that? That our public and our customers understand that we're protecting their safety of eating with us and that we're protecting that brand. And that's where we find that RFID and solutions like Mojex are helping to do that. And again, we're going from that worker-driven transaction, and we're looking at things like RFID, is more of a sensor-driven transactions. Okay. So real quick, and Patty talked about it earlier, the FSMA 204, some of the key data elements are embedded in a 2D barcode traditionally. And I just grabbed a picture of a package of hamburger patties, right? And some of the things that are embedded in those 2D barcodes are the G10. And somebody asked, what the G10 is, and Patty was right, absolutely. It's the global trade identification number that as a product owner, a brand owner, I work with GS1 and I say, hey, I've got this Angus bacon and cheddar patty burger that comes as, you can read it, 16 ounces. And I go and I get a registration, I get a global trade identification number that's assigned to my company for that particular product in that format, right? So that tells me what is it and who made it. Now, when you talk about serialization, we add a serial number to it, which is a SG10, and that identifies that particular product that I'm holding in my hand. And then we can assign attributes to that serialized product, like the expiration date, to make sure that the patty is still safe to eat. Or a lot code. How do I know that those beef patties have been recalled? Now I have data that's smartly enabled into those labels where I can use technology not only to help me manage inventory and product going in and out, but also to find and help me rotate stock like we were talking about with the Mojex example. And really from the RFID to barcoding, what's the big difference? The big difference is that with barcoding, you have to have line of sight and a worker-initiated transaction to actually capture that information and to leverage that information. As with RFID, sensors can read multiple tags at one time, automatically at those different choke points like I talked about, in and out of a door, from front of the office to the front of the store. Those sort of things can be used within that workflow to capture devices and do those critical tracking elements, and they don't have to be worker-initiated transactions, okay? So how's RFID being used at QSRs now? And we're really seeing, a big adoption in farmative work along the supply chain. And again, I appreciate Patty's presentation earlier because it really, talked about what we're seeing and how the supply chain is starting to come together to figure out what's in it, what's the value proposition and the ROI along the supply chain so that we cooperate. And that's something that we're seeing here at Zebra across different verticals as well. So one of the first things that, they'll talk about, and there's a link to this, Chipotle, we're using a mobile device with a software like a Mojex on it that's connected to a RFID sled. So I can quickly, scan those items, multiple items at a time in that environment and quickly use an application to do a lot of different things that Patty was talking about, like tracking product levels in the back room. And we're seeing adoption of this across a lot of the key, QSRs, right? But also, how do we identify and locate items that are ready to expire? This allows us to, search for items, give us an idea that, hey, this box of lettuce is older, and use that Geiger counter function to actually find that and locate it and pull those. Again, as a 19, 20-year-old kid, just if I could, do the inventory accurately, I thought I was doing great. But, when my manager said, well, did you rotate the stock? I kind of looked at him kind of funny and said, sure, boss, I'm all over that, right? But again, we're finding that these regulations are helping to keep our families safe. And so these type of tools, I think, are going to help the workers force now that relates to technology to embrace that and help us make sure that this is working as efficiently as it can. Again, automated ordering a receipt, we talked about that. Identifying recalled product with that Geiger counter function, disposable of that and reporting. It can all be automated by collecting this data automatically in order to leverage that data, not only for that store, but for at the corporate level or a buying group, however that QSR is structured. And then also just for sustainability, we're seeing different coffee clubs come up with RFID or QR codes on the coffee cups so they can be reusable, right? So help to address some of the landfill issues. So, to kind of wrap up here a little bit, I think everybody's really understands that these labor shortages, they're here to stay, but technology can really help us here in different ways. And again, my next window, please, sign from Wendy's here is just a very good reminder every day that I see this. Customers in those corporate entities, they expect the same experience regardless if you have staffing challenges or not. And I think as technology solution providers that are on the call, I think if we can be aware of that and we can empathize with our customers in the industry, I think it's going to help pull us together and really help to make sure that we're all tackling this as one. Those new tools, they can help those managers and staff focus on providing those quality products and services. And that's really what it's all about. How do we automate some of those different administrative tasks that are just as important as serving that product to that customer, but make sure that the focus is in the right place. And the focus should be on people. It should be on meeting those brand expectations or objectives. The QSR staff and any staff that we talk about, when they go to work, they want to do their best job in the workplace. And I think this technology helps them to, again, focus on what's important. But at the end of the day, like it or not, I have a 19-year-old that I'll throw under the bus for you. These young adults, they tend to struggle, to balance work and fun priorities, just like me as an old adult too. And sometimes, they just don't want to come into work that day, because they want to do something fun with their friends. And that tends to, upset the apple cart. And we're hoping that, some of this technology that we're looking at and we're seeing adoption can help mitigate some of those issues. So that wraps up what I want to talk about. I'll kind of open up here to see if there's any questions.
Yeah, thank you, John. Appreciate your insights here. So like he said, we do have some time for questions, and I'll just start off with how are these workers going to be trained? Is there a guidebook or something restaurants could utilize for these technologies?
Well, I think it depends on the applications that they're using. So like I said, there's a couple of different ways that RFID can be applied. There can be sensors that are put, or we call antennas and readers that are put at a doorway or a choke point, so that those critical tracking elements or those things can be done automatically. But there's also use cases like Patty was talking about earlier, where there's an application that's put on a mobile device that's coupled with an RFID handheld or a sled. That application can be intuitive enough to walk that user through those different use cases. And I think what we're seeing is that, again, the workers in the workforce now, that's their life, right? They use these applications every day, and they're intuitive. It's familiar to them. And I think the training becomes less of an obstacle because the workforce today really understands how to use these applications.
And another question we have is, will processes like these work outside of a quick service restaurant?
Absolutely. We're seeing RFID and certain these type of processes used, obviously, in retail, quick service, convenience stores. Anytime where there's something that needs to be stocked and inventory needs to be managed, we're seeing adoption of this type of technology. So a lot of the things that you might adopt, that Mojix, for instance, may build for a quick service restaurant are also applicable to other areas as well. So quick, convenience store, a retail environment. A lot of these different areas have the same goal where they have to manage inventory, but also manage the condition of some of those perishable types of inventory to make sure that, we're not serving something that's been recalled, or we're serving something that is in compliance to an expiration date, or even just the condition, make sure it's been maintained at the right temperature or humidity. Those temperature sensing things that we talked about with the Williet solutions are all coming into play as well.
Then what do you see technologically in the future for quick service restaurants?
Well, again, I see more dependent on more, if you will, automated solutions. So less reliance on even handheld scanners for a worker who happen to initiate a transaction. I see that more artificial intelligence and machine learning will be used to capture product movement within a facility that adapts to a workflow, so that a lot of the different things, that decisions that are made by a manager are starting to get learned and used for machine learning and AI to make those automatically for a manager. So again, the idea here is for people to concentrate on people, and for these administrative tasks to be hopefully performed in cooperation with people, but behind the scenes.
Great. Well, thank you for your time and insights today, John. Greatly appreciated.
Happy to. Thank you.